Hello, my name is Spencer, and in my podcast called The Dictionary, I literally read from the dictionary, but add in my personal comments and stupid jokes to make it more interesting. Episodes are family-friendly, short, and air every single day on basically every podcast platform. Come join me on this journey filled with edutainment.
Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is the podcast all about the movies you never saw, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
My name is Daniel Kaka.
My name is Michael Hunter.
And my name's Alexa Quizon.
Hey, first take.
We did it.
We did it!
We got the whole Pipe Dream crew here today.
Yeah. This has been pretty fun because last week I've been kind of putting together like this whole Weird Alphabet reunion. The week before we actually got Andrew Frola on to talk about PT and Silent Hills, and that was a lot of fun to do.
Nice.
And Alexa, we've had you on before.
Yes.
We had you on for our Christmas special, the Pixar one, and we had you on for Chris Sanders as well.
American Dog?
Yes, American Dog.
That's what it was.
Michael, this is your first official time, but I do want to state you have been on this show 2 times before. You were on Superman Lives, where you interviewed the late John Shepp. And then I had you come in to do a song for RoboCop.
Right.
As well.
RoboCop. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
That was so much fun to do, by the way.
But now we actually have you on officially as a guest.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Michael, what have you been doing? Well, you're doing other stuff with Pipe Dream, but what else have you been up to?
Obviously, you've been doing Come On Fhqwhpods with David and Alexa here.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing a lot of songs, a lot of intro songs. Like every episode, we have a new intro song completely done from scratch. In fact, I was writing some last night. Yeah, and some of them that you've helped me out with, Dan. You've given me prompts.
Right.
Dan, what are we talking about today?
So we are doing a suggestion. Oh man, I should have brought up this email.
I'm very excited for this episode.
Yeah, we had an email from Rose Weldon. She suggested that we do what I thought was just a spoof film, Jaws 3, People Zero. And in the research, I found out it was more than just that and was actually attached to the franchise. Now, before we get into this, I just want to kind of get our experience with Jaws, not necessarily Steven Spielberg per se, but just with the Jaws franchise. Alexa, let's start with you because you have a pretty unique story.
Yes. So I saw Jaws today. The thing about me is for a lot of the time, I know quotes from a movie. I know what happens in a movie, but that doesn't necessarily mean I've watched it. So my knowledge of Jaws has been movie quotes and small scenes that I see here and there. I've been missing a very important part of my life I've discovered today. So that's what that's all about.
Jaws is such a classic. Like, it's one of those movies, and I'm sure you felt this way, Alexa, that even if you've never seen it before, watching it, you're like, oh my goodness, I know this movie because it's been referenced so many times in so many different places.
Because you've been on the Universal Studios famous studio tour.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I took a picture next to the shark, which I don't think exists anymore because people probably got mad at that. And that's like my favorite part of the ride.
Was when the shark comes?
Yeah, when the shark comes. And I know I'm going to get scared. I still get scared. And I still hope that the fisherman makes it. I don't know if this still happens, but when I was a kid, the fisherman does come back up in the ride and then his back is just mangled by
No, they don't do that anymore.
Okay, that's different. Then I had a very different childhood than a lot of people.
It was really fun watching Jaws with Alexa this morning because I was constantly being like, oh, wait, you got to watch this scene. This is a classic. Oh, you got to watch this moment. Every other scene is a piece of cinema history.
Yeah.
I can say for me, I don't think I saw Jaws until I was in film school, but immediately recognized for the classic that it was. That's one of those movies that gets like studied a lot, especially as far as directing goes. There's a lot of really interesting directing choices that Spielberg makes in that movie that makes it so memorable. But I think my favorite Jaws memory is when I first moved out to LA, I was staying with some friends at a friend's house who had a pool. One day we set up a projector outside and at nighttime sat in the pool and watched Jaws. It was a good time.
That's the best way to watch Jaws.
That's awesome.
In the spirit of this podcast, being a visual medium that podcasts are, everybody knows that Dan always likes to wear a shirt themed to the episode. And I'm very proud that I actually have a Jaws shirt that I am wearing today. One of my favorite shirts. It's got the Jaws shark and it says Jawsome at the bottom. I love this shirt. I was very excited to have an occasion to wear this today.
My shirt today, I just brought back Jurassic Park just because we're going to be talking a lot again about Steven Spielberg.
And this is like the Spielberg movie.
Yes, it is.
Well, I guess there's a lot of movies that are the Spielberg movie, but this is definitely a big one.
I guess for me, when it comes to Jaws, David, I'm in the same boat as you. I didn't really have free reign when it came to movies growing up. So as soon as I graduated high school, I had like a summer to just kill, essentially. And so I would go to Walmart and go to the $5 DVDs, and I would try to find as many classic movies as humanly possible.
Yes, love it.
And if I couldn't find them there, I'd go to Blockbuster and rent them and go from there. And so what I ended up doing was watching all of the great movies of our time, and if they're a franchise, I watched the franchise. So Rocky, all of the Rockies. Terminator, all the Terminators. RoboCop, all the RoboCops.
Yes.
And of course, Jaws, and all of the Jaws.
Oh, I've never seen any of the Jaws sequels.
Well,
Does Jaws like Jaws harder or something? Does he have like multiple Jaws?
I think it's Jaws 2, The Revenge.
No, Jaws 4.
Jaws 4, The Revenge.
Jaws
oh my
4,
gosh.
The Revenge, which, and then Jaws 3D, and then going back, Jaws 2.
When you're talking about movies and movie history, I feel like there's the era of classic movies and the era of more modern movies. This feels like the defining line. I would say this and The Godfather are like the defining lines, where movies that came out before those feel like an old movie, and it's harder to get a typical person to watch those. Any movie that came out after them feels like a movie with modern sensibilities that you could put on in front of everybody. That's not a hard and fast rule, but I know like people who aren't even into movies that much, who maybe have seen one movie, if that was made before Jaws, because this feels like the dividing line of cinema history.
Yeah.
I concur. I think the other part of it too is nowadays we're so used to the action-packed movies, the movies that are constantly throwing something at you every 5 minutes. With those older films, they take time to relish in those moments.
Yeah.
The monologues in Jaws are brilliant.
But it's not going to be pleasant. I value my neck a lot more than $3,000, Chief. I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10. And you got to make up your minds. You want to stay alive and ante up? You want to play it cheap? Be on welfare the whole winter.
Knowing what I know about the sequels of Jaws, the original Jaws is a psychological thriller.
It's like half thriller, half adventure movie.
Yeah.
Because around the halfway point, it turns into an adventure movie of hunting the shark. Yeah. There's still a couple of horror-ish elements to it, but it takes on like a totally different genre.
Right. But everything after that started to go with the trends that were also happening in Hollywood with slasher films and whatever was popular, and trying to bring that to the big screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought of it as a psychological thriller until you said that, Michael. So that makes a lot more sense to me. I was telling David that the scenes that I knew of were clearly the iconic scenes. And I was just like, okay, these are great scenes. I can understand why they're iconic. But of course, seeing it for the first time today, I tend to love the ones that people don't talk about as much. One of those things were just really small moments of the main character being afraid of water, and they never fully talk about that until maybe the end, where he was like, I've always hated water. There are small moments where you see him not jumping into the water when the kids are about to get eaten, basically.
Yeah.
I don't know if this happens in the sequels, Michael, and you can confirm this for me, but if that was something that happened by not Steven Spielberg, I think they would have hammed that up a little bit more. Like, he would have woken up and be like, oh, water, you know, like, oh, water, no. And like,
You mean Jurassic Park 3 levels of like, Alan, like with the velociraptor?
the water talks to him and says like, come into the water. Like, it's just like, it's really funny. Like, that's what I think would have happened. And that's why when you said psychological thriller, I was like, that makes so much sense. Because again, a lot of it is psychological.
One of the weird things about it, like being basically two different movies, the first half of the movie, the main antagonist is the mayor.
Yeah.
He's the main obstacle of the movie. And then the moment that they hire Robert Shaw to go out on the ocean, he's gone for the rest of the movie. Like, you do not see him again. And inversely, Robert Shaw only appears in one scene until they hire him to go out on the water.
The other thing, Alexa, when this movie came out, this spawned such a stir about going to the beach. People were afraid to go to the beach. It worked as a psychological thriller to embed this sense of fear in the audiences.
The Exorcist had a very similar vibe to it, where anyone who watched The Exorcist, even though the Catholic Church was adamantly opposed to it and was trying to boycott it, the result of that movie was that more people were going to church after that.
And so it really worked. People got genuinely freaked out by sharks, and they genuinely got freaked out by just being out in the ocean.
Let's just go into the story. Now, I do have to mention that the name of this film, which I don't think we actually mentioned before, it is Jaws 3, People Zero.
Perfect title.
That's great. I love that.
I think what I love so much about it as well, and the sense I get from this story, is like, the original Jaws is like, you know, an important moment in cinema history. But to what Michael was saying earlier, the Jaws sequels have like quickly became kind of a meme of ridiculous Hollywood sequels that don't need to happen. I mean, there's a whole Back to the Future joke about it.
Shark still looks fake.
The fact that this movie feels like it's leaning into that by just making it more ridiculous, it's perfect. It's so good.
Yeah. So the history that I want to start off with first is actually parody and spoof films, because they have been around basically ever since film has been around. In fact, the year 1900, there was a 30-second short called Sherlock Holmes Baffled, created by Arthur Marvin. In it, we see Sherlock enter a room where a robbery is currently taking place. With some clever editing tricks, the robber then like disappears and reappears around the room, baffling the sleuth. The first time that we ever saw a film parody was actually in 1905. It was a spoof of The Great Train Robbery, which was done in 1903. It was actually called The Little Train Robbery. The film was about 10 minutes long, in which we follow a bunch of children robbing a small kiddie train.
Oh, perfect.
Ironically, though, both of them were directed by Edwin S. Porter.
Oh,
He directed the parody too?
He directed his own parody, yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's predating feature-length films. The early film parodies that I would think of is Buster Keaton, because Buster Keaton did Steamboat Will Jr., did Sherlock Jr., and did these parodies of Sherlock Holmes, Steamboat Willie. That was one of his things. I didn't realize Edwin S. Porter did a parody of his own movie. That's incredible.
Yeah, he got to it before anyone else could.
That makes me think that Hollywood was like, you need to make more family-friendly movies. And so he goes, I got one for you.
I wonder if that inspired the Little Rascals then, because I feel like between Little Rascals and Shirley Temple, they both were making fun of those types of films.
Yeah, they had to. Yeah.
Wow. I gotta watch that.
It's pretty great. I searched for it on YouTube. It's pretty awesome.
You can find a lot of silent films on YouTube for free.
Let's get into the meat of things. The movie Jaws, if you're unaware, is based on a Peter Benchley 1974 novel under the same title. For Benchley, he was always fascinated by sharks, which all started when he would go fishing with his father in Nantucket. In a behind-the-scenes interview with Benchley, he had always wanted to write, quote, a story about a shark that attacks people and what would happen if it came in and wouldn't go away. He didn't find any inspiration until he read the 1964 news article about Frank Mundus, a fisherman who caught a 4,550-pound great white shark.
Wow.
That's 2,060 kilograms for those who are outside of the U.S. He caught that shark off the shore of Montauk, New York. Another story that inspired the novel was the 5 recorded Jersey Shore attacks that happened between July 1st and July 12th in 1916, which prompted a handful of people to get commissioned to hunt down the menacing shark. At the time, Benchley was working as a nonfiction writer, but his editor, Thomas Condon at Doubleday Publishing Group, was primarily interested in his idea of a shark terrorizing a beach resort. After sending a page sample to Condon, he agreed that he would be paid in advance $1,000 per 100 pages. After Peter was done writing the manuscript, he received $7,500.
I'm just imagining you had to hit that 100 mark, and he wrote something that was 185 pages. Like, I gotta crank out 15 more in here just to reach that next threshold.
Since Benchley knew little about the sharks, he got his research from the 1971 documentary Blue Water White Death and the books Peter Matheson's Blue Meridian and Jacques Cousteau's The Shark Splendid Savage of the Sea. There's Thomas B. Allen's Shadow in the Sea and David H. Davies about sharks and shark attacks. If your last name is Davies, why would you name your son David?
Because the world needs more Davids, clearly.
I guess so.
I see that. But have you ever heard of William December Williams?
No.
AKA Billy D. Williams?
The first few chapters were written with a more comedic tone in its first draft, and Condon felt that the book should be met with a more serious tone. So the chapters had to be rewritten. There was a sex scene that was between Brody, which was later named Hooper, and his wife.
Oh.
The manuscript took about a year and a half to complete. After more rewrites and revisions, the final draft was delivered in January 1973. I imagine the sex scene that was cut out, which if you watch the movie, there was that one part where they're just like, hey, should we just get drunk and fool around? I have a feeling that's where it fit in there.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. Over at Universal Studios, producers Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown heard about the novel Jaws. Brown had heard about it from his wife, Helen Gurley Brown, who was the editor at Cosmopolitan, when the magazine featured it in the literature section. In the short review, it states at the end of it that it would, quote, make a good movie. Both Zanuck and Brown read the book overnight and the next morning agreed that they should make this into a movie, without the slightest clue as to how it would be accomplished. They managed to purchase the rights to the novel for about $175,000 in 1973, a year before the book was officially published. Brown does admit that had he read the book twice, he would have second-guessed how to execute certain sequences and probably never would have greenlit the film in the first place.
Oh, wow.
This is kind of a similar situation to Jurassic Park too, right? Where the book had its film rights sold before the book even came out.
Yeah. It was Steven Spielberg was just really interested in, and he's like, dinosaurs sounds way better than some medical drama that you're coming up with. They didn't have to figure out how that was all going to be put together, because really that's the director's job to figure out how that's going to be all to put together. And who better to put this all together than John Sturges, director of The Great Escape, The Magnificent Seven, and most relevant, The Old Man and the Sea.
Okay.
When Sturges declined the offer, they then went to the up-and-coming director, Dick Richards, who had recently finished directing the Culpeper Cattle Co. and would go on to produce Tootsie.
Oh, Tootsie.
I'm sorry. I just have to point out, his name is Dick Richards, a.k.a. Richard Richards.
Yes, we're getting a lot of that in this story.
This is a real theme. Wow.
When Zanuck and Brown grew irritated with Richard constantly describing the shark as a whale, they knew he wasn't right to direct it and soon dropped him from the project.
There's a whale, there's a wave.
Amazing.
I'll see myself out.
You know that's a shark,
I wouldn't
right?
even call that Jaws. That's more like nose. You know, it's just like Doesn't just a whale have a big nose?
I mean, wasn't there also like a movie called Orca that came out shortly after Jaws that was focused on like a whale, like a killer whale?
Isn't that Free Willy?
Yes.
Free Willy had a past, like before ending up in SeaWorld.
While Zanuck and Brown were piecing together Jaws, they were working with a young 26-year-old director, Steven Spielberg.
AKA Steven Stevenson.
He was working on a little film called The Sugarland Express. After Spielberg finished making Sugarland, he had a meeting with the two producers to discuss his next project. That's when Steven noticed the unpublished novel in their office and asked if he could read it. They lent him the book. He read it immediately and was very enthusiastic about making this into a film. He won over the producers when he explained the similarities between this story and his 1971 film Duel.
Yep. We talked about Duel on a previous episode, on our Night Skies episode. For anybody who didn't listen to that episode, as a real quick connection, Duel is about a guy being run off the road by a truck. You never really know what the motivation is. It's just this truck is trying to run this guy off the road. You never see inside the truck. And so it definitely captures that same kind of like thriller, tense aspects that Jaws is known for and a lot of Spielberg films are known for. Yeah, and that kind of idea of just this like unstoppable force trying to get you.
And in this case, Jaws is about a shark trying to run Hooper off the road in any way possible. In June 1973, Spielberg was slated to direct Jaws. So for Jaws, he was given 55 days to shoot and $3.5 million for his budget. Now, there are numerous stories that have come out about the production of Jaws, like how the mechanical shark was named Bruce after Steven Spielberg's lawyer, Bruce Rammer. The shark did malfunction and sank to the bottom of the ocean. Peter Benchley, the writer of the novel, cameoed as a reporter.
Oh.
Spielberg thought that John Williams' score was a joke at first.
Wow.
And then,
What?
yeah, because he brought him over to the piano. He's like, here's what I'm thinking. And he just played the two notes. Doo-doo, and that was it. And he's like, serious? That's it? No.
Listen, it gets better.
I worked really hard on this.
My favorite story about this is that Steven Spielberg was so hated by the crew that he actually snuck away during the martini shot in fear that the crew would beat him up after they wrapped shooting.
Why did they not like him? I feel like the stories I had always heard about Spielberg is that, well, I guess this would have been from the producer aspect, that producers really liked working with him because unlike most filmmakers during the 70s, he was always on time, always sober, and was easy to work
I
with.
hate those sober directors.
Yeah.
A lot of other directors at the time sure weren't that.
Bar was really low, so.
If you expect Coppola to show up to your film set sober, then
Coppola has a wine. Doesn't he have like a wine label?
Yeah.
Even better. Look at that.
Jaws was a huge box office hit and is known today as the birth of the blockbuster.
yeah, literally the first blockbuster.
Yeah. For Universal, this was a big gamble. So during the production, they had to add 104 more days to the originally scheduled shooting days. So that's part of the reason why the crew may have hated him.
Oh, just because there was like so much stuff going wrong.
Yeah.
And they probably blamed it on him a lot. That makes sense.
Because they filmed it in Florida, correct?
Yeah.
They filmed the beach parts in Florida, and they ended up having to close the beaches in Florida to film this, which upset a lot of people.
The mayor is like, you can't close the beaches on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
On top of that, they also tripled their budget, which cost the studio then $9 million to produce this film. On top of that, they spent $1.8 million on marketing, which included a $700,000 TV spot. On its opening weekend, though, Jaws opened in 409 theaters and made a record $7 million in the first weekend, which was not enough to make up for their losses, but their luck did catch up to them when, after 10 days in the theater, the film made over $21 million. And in 59 days, it grossed over $100 million, the first time a movie ever reached $100 million. The only other movie that got that close was The Godfather with $86 million. Now, that was just the domestic release. When the movie was then released internationally, it broke box office records in Singapore, New Zealand, Japan, Spain, and Mexico. With all the releases, Jaws has grossed $472 million worldwide. Basically, this film was just printing money. It was just coming in by the truckloads. And not only that, but the rentals for this movie alone made the film an extra $133 million. So for Universal, it would just be stupid if they just did not make a sequel for this movie.
This is a movie that made Spielberg and really made him Mr. Movies and defined the era of 70s and especially 80s filmmaking of big genre films and going into like the VCR age and movie rental age and, you know, one of those movies that people could watch over and over and over again.
You know, it was like serious money could actually be made from movies. This is seriously seen as like a potential real moneymaker, and Steven Spielberg was basically just like their lucky loaded dice, where he could almost do no wrong now.
Yeah.
The producers, David Brown and Richard Sunak, planned on putting together a sequel while the film was still in theaters and tried to get in contact with Steven Spielberg, who adamantly avoided their calls, claiming that, quote, making a sequel to anything is just a cheap, carny trick.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that quote came from him while he was at the San Francisco Film Festival. He says that the first proposed pitch for the sequel would involve Hooper's sons, Quint and Brody, hunting down another deadly shark.
Aww.
Spielberg was not interested, but I think he didn't want to do it primarily because he had an awful experience doing the first film. He's actually quoted saying, "I would have done the sequel if I hadn't had such a horrible time at sea on the first film." I just think he just didn't want to do Jaws, period. At all. He didn't want to go back out on the water.
I think he literally called it hell. Like, he was just saying, like, it was a hellish experience.
Yeah. He just didn't want to go through that again. He's probably has PTSD from doing this film. He's like, no. Obviously, you're seeing money, but like, I see myself going through an awful, terrible experience again, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Universal didn't care for Spielberg's statement and carried on to make the sequel without his blessing.
Good luck.
Howard Sackler was tasked with writing the first draft of the film, but asked not to be credited. Sackler's first draft was originally a prequel all about the USS Indianapolis and the story Quint shared in the first film.
Such a bad idea.
Yeah.
But around this time, Spielberg did consider directing the sequel, but because of obligations with Close Encounters, Universal would have to wait for him to be done with that movie. They didn't want to wait for that.
With the Indianapolis speech, I feel like I remember a story that the original plan was to actually film the flashback, and so have him basically tell the story and then us watch it visually. And then Robert Shaw's performance was just so good that they're like, it's so good just watching him do the speech. It's already compelling. We don't need to film this. Let's just go with the speech.
Also, we're already 109 days over, so no.
Yeah, that too.
I could be off base about that, but it's like to then go and say, you know what? Let's actually turn that into a whole movie is bad and dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that moment in particular, at least from what I've read, it seemed like Robert Shaw was the third rewrite of that monologue. There was a rewrite of that and then a rewrite of that, and then Robert Shaw was like, let me do it, and then he just did that performance, and I was like, okay. Like, yep, that's the one.
Sometimes that sharky looks right into you, right into your eyes. You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes.
It's really sad that they took such a special moment that is just meant to be that one moment into a whole other thing, and that kind of takes away the magic a little bit.
So, David, you are not alone in thinking that that was a bad idea, because the Universal president at that time, Sidney Sheinberg, he read the script and also said, no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this at all. So after a new draft was written, Sackler recommended John D. Hancock, who wrote and directed Bang the Drum Slowly, to direct the film. So filming began in June 1977, but after a month, they began running into problems. The Universal and MCA execs were not a fan of the film's dark tone and wanted something more lighthearted and had more action. Hancock also made the suggestion that the character played by Lorraine Gary, who was Sidney Sheinberg's wife, Hancock had asked if she could, quote, should go out on a boat and help to rescue the kids, in which was met with Zanuck replying, over my dead body. So, no. A new draft was written and Hancock left the production. When asked as to why he left the production, he would tell the press that there were mechanical problems with the shark, much like the first film. The production shut down for weeks. Carl Gottlieb, the screenplay writer for the first Jaws, was hired to write the new draft and would add humor and reduce the violence. Jaws production designer Joe Alves and editor Verna Fields, who had been promoted to VP at Universal, proposed that they could co-direct the sequel, but the DGA would not allow it. The job was given to Janat Schwartz, who directed 19 episodes of Night Gallery and recently directed Bug. To direct the film right away, so Schwartz put together a complicated water skiing scene while Gottlieb put together a new draft. To avoid shark complications they experienced in the first film, special mechanical effects supervisor Robert Maddy and Roy Arbogast put together 3 sharks. They used old molds from the first shark and tried to salvage what was left of Bruce. But since Bruce had been rotting behind a shed on Universal's backlot, it could not be salvaged very well.
It's amazing that they would even try to reuse the old shark. You know that thing that famously made the movie go triple its budget? Let's do that again.
Yeah. I'm surprised that they just threw it away somewhere and didn't try to put that in a museum to be like, this is the shark from Jaws. I don't know why they didn't try and capitalize on that.
I mean, I feel like movie studios were a lot less precious about film history at the time. Nowadays, they would keep everything, but there's a bunch of collectors who have pieces of the Death Star miniature that they used at the end of Star Wars because they were dumpster diving out behind ILM because they were literally finding these pieces in dumpsters behind ILM because they just didn't think to keep it.
I mean, I guess we did discuss it when we did Doctor Who, where they would just destroy the entire BBC archives once a year to be like, we got to make room for more stuff.
Yep.
Jaws 2 was released June 16th, 1978, the same day as Grease, and ended up being the most expensive movie Universal had produced up to this date with a budget of $30 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure that gamble paid off.
Yeah, from $9 million, which was $6 million over budget, to then tripling over that for this film. Yeah, that's a big budget.
The idea of movie sequels were also pretty new at the time. Not that there weren't sequels, but famously, Godfather Part 2 is the first time a movie ever has 2 in the title as a sequel.
Oh.
It was always things like the sequel to Frankenstein wasn't called Frankenstein 2. It was The Bride of Frankenstein.
Right.
Godfather Part 2 kind of broke a seal that kind of made sequels in fashion again. Again, there were sequels, especially in the 40s, the classic studio era, but it was more like franchises like Frankenstein or Sergio Leone with the Dollars trilogy.
Mm-hmm. We're starting to steer away from that now, though, where sequels for movies
don't have numbers again.
Yeah, they won't have numbers. They'll just have a colon and then something else afterwards. It's still hovering around. So even with Marvel, we still have that. We're going to have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 coming pretty soon as well. So it's still around.
Yeah. All of the movies up until this point, if they did have 2 in the title, it was always the Roman numeral.
Oh.
And Jaws 2 is the first blockbuster film, and if not the first film to actually feature the number 2.
Godfather Part 2, that didn't have a number 2?
No, he's right. Roman numerals for that one.
Oh.
Yeah. So Jaws 2 is technically the first time we see the way that we would write the number 2 for a title.
Interesting.
I'm glad Jaws 2 makes some kind of history. That's great.
So yeah, back to Jaws 2. On its opening weekend, the film performed better than the first. It actually made over $16 million in the first weekend, breaking the record for the highest grossing film for that opening weekend. The film ended up grossing about $208 million, which is less than half than the first film made, but Regardless, it was still making money. The IP was still profitable. So why not continue with another sequel? To no surprise, anyone involved with the actual making of the film was not interested in coming back, while those who wanted another film, David Brown and Richard Zanuck, only saw money bags and would do anything to make it happen. Roy Scheider, he agreed to do the film Blue Thunder to avoid being in the third Jaws movie, even though he had a 3-film contract that needed to be fulfilled with Universal. Even the original writers, Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb, didn't want anything to do with this. So who could Brown and Zanuck turn towards to make more money?
Can I say something real quick about Roy Scheider real quick? 'Cause
Yes.
He has a very interesting story. Just his work on the first Jaws and the second Jaws. When he was doing the second Jaws, he hated the experience so much that he was trying to literally get out of it even in production.
Huh.
I remember reading that he had completely destroyed his hotel room. Trying to convince the producers that he was mentally insane. That way he could be relieved from the contract. But of course, they didn't believe him. He was just always in an argument war with the director and just constantly back and forth, just yelling, screaming. At the end of the filming, he was like, there's no way in hell that you're getting me back to do another Jaws film. And then that ties directly into, like, he made sure that his managers, his agents were always booking him to make sure that he will always have an excuse to not do Jaws 3.
Amazing.
He's just doing like hot dog commercials.
And to this day, he still has not done Jaws 3.
Oh, yeah.
Who could Brown and Zanuck turn towards to make more money? What direction could they go in for the third film? Well, with the wild success of Animal House from National Lampoon, why not turn to those guys to make Jaws a slapstick comedy? To help create a story, they called on Maddie Simmons, who is National Lampoon's editor and producer of Animal House. Brown agreed to the story after Simmons ad-libbed a story during a dinner that they had at the Friars Club in New York City. To help write the script, they hired Todd Carroll and John Hughes, who at the time was part of the writing staff for National Lampoon's Delta House.
This would be before, like, John Hughes was directing anything.
Yes, before any of it,
Yeah.
like before he became this household name. So I'm going to go into the plot of Jaws 3, People 0. So I managed to actually find the script for it. I did a synopsis for it, so we're going to go through that story right now.
I'm ready for this.
Okay. We open on a black screen that reads Jaws 3. It fades. Then it reads People 0. And then it fades into an underwater shot, simulating the first shot in Jaws. It's revealed that we are in Peter Benchley's pool. Peter is in his study, typing the final draft to Jaws 3, and heads to the pool for a swim. He dives in and unexpectedly becomes the victim of a shark attack. Days after, he's buried at sea, and when his coffin doesn't sink into the water, it is shot by a submachine gun until it goes under.
Okay. All right.
Jaws 3 is in production and is a mess. We open on a grip retrieving a camera that fell into the water. Along with the crew, we have two main actors, Butch Pelosso and Darlene Derpequet. I didn't come up with these names. In the script, the director as written as director, but he is addressed by other characters as Steven, so
Okay.
I think we know what's going on here.
Wonder who that's about. Yeah.
Steven is complaining to the producer, Canterbury, all about the issues. His lead, Butch Pelosso, who is a lean 180 pounds, is now sitting at a schlubby 240 pounds because some idiot from the studio approved for his Italian mother to be on set and has been feeding him all day.
Oh, wow.
Canterbury promises to fix the problems on set and that this will be better than Jaws 1. Steven retorts that it's already better than Jaws 2. Steven has had enough and he quits. Canterbury invites the main actress, Darlene, with him to an executive exclusive beach party. Darlene runs into the ocean similar to the opening scene of Jaws, and Canterbury chases after her. Canterbury is taken out by a shark, similar to how the skinny dipping girl did in the first film, and Darlene finds his remains washed up on the beach the next morning. Back at Mecha Studios, Producer Marvin is now in charge. He believes this until they find Canterbury's will that reads that his shares of the company will go to a woman that he never forgot, Irma Gurning. He and the producers have no idea who this is. We cut to Dimter, Idaho, population 2001, home of the spud lint. Quote, people making lint from potatoes and putting it into pockets for people.
I thought it was going to be like a potato restaurant. Just like all potatoes.
No. Everything that you assume about this movie is just way off base. In Dimter, Idaho, this is where we find Irma Gurning, working at a ticket booth for a local movie theater. Her son, Sonny Gurning, works at the potato lint factory, but has a clear passion for science fiction movies. A telegram is sent to Irma informing her about Canterbury's death and her $180 million inheritance along with his properties, but most importantly, she has been named chairperson of the board of directors at Mecca Studios.
Oh.
Irma and Sonny are off to Hollywood. In Hollywood, that's where they meet Bernie Maven in his lavish home. Maven has an aside with his assistant, Marilyn, furious at her for allowing Irma to accept the position as chairperson. Maven goes back to Irma and shows her the view of the ocean from his lawn. There is a swing under a gazebo at the edge of the cliff. Maven convinces Irma to sit on the swing as he maliciously pushes her, trying to cause a, quote, accident.
What?
Yeah. The Jaws theme plays over the scene. In the ocean is a shark, and if she falls into the ocean, she is certain to be eaten. Before the last push, Irma grabs onto Maven's tie and flings him into the ocean, but the shark only pushes him back into the shore unscathed. Marilyn consults a shark expert, Pere Cockatoo, who explains that this shark is targeting everyone involved with the movie. At the studio, producer Droner and Maven tour Sonny around the lot and offer him the opportunity of a lifetime. They actually want him to write and direct the new Jaws 3, knowing that he'll fail and his mother will have to answer to his downfall, and then hoping to remove her as the chairperson. In Idaho, Sonny's girlfriend, Wendy, packs her bags and plans to go out to Hollywood. Sonny, back at the studio, meets with the actress Darlene, which there's just this wacky interaction that involves bare breasts, tourists, and an unfortunate Perrier incident.
And you said this was written by National Lampoon writers?
Ah, yeah.
Wild.
Never would have guessed.
Explains the breasts, yeah.
The amount of bare breasts in this movie is absurd, where I don't think I could survive a drinking game after reading this.
When I was watching Jaws, I was like, you know what this needs?
Breasts.
Breasts. More
More
bare
breasts.
breasts.
Yep.
Especially on the sharks.
Yes.
Absolutely on the shark. Mm-hmm. I think David just wants to see some shark breasts.
Yeah, that works,
Yeah.
right? That's a thing.
I never thought I would hear the word shark breath or the phrase shark breaths.
All right. Sonny is furiously working on the script for Jaws 3, making it a sci-fi hybrid where the population of Amity are from outer space, and one of them has taken the form of a giant killer shark. With the help of Bell Captain, just some guy who was just assigned to deliver a TV and was formerly a writer for Chinchillas from Hell, they actually got together and put together an incredible story. Now, Marilyn thinks that it's terrible, but Sonny convinces her that this is what the people want to see. Shark breasts. The production is a disaster. In the first shot, they have a bunch of extras running into the water after someone yells shark. The AD tries to inform Sonny of his mistake, and realizing that they can't get another take, he just tells the crew that they're just going to reverse the footage and fix the shot that way. So fix it in post.
So just running backwards, okay.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Droner tries to sabotage the production, and with no success. Meanwhile, Irma is shown the newest shark for the film, Bruce 3, with much success. We watch the behind-the-scenes look at the scene with Darlene and Butch getting attacked by the shark, and the shark sinks. As Darlene swims to Sonny's boat, a shark swims up to the surface and nearly attacks her. No one notices, though. In the second attack, the shark knocks the boat, causing Sonny to fall overboard. When we see him in the water, he's covered in blood, looking like he has been bitten, but he's actually just swimming in chum. When they retrieve Bruce 3, they find that the mechanical shark has been torn in 2 halves, and the 2 men inside the suit, which is kind of a horse costume situation, they manage to survive.
I'm just imagining seeing a head on one side and feet dangling on the other.
Darlene is concerned that they need to shut down production until the real shark is taken care of, while Sonny doesn't want to because if he goes over budget, it'll ruin his reputation. At night, Darlene starts to cozy up to Sonny in his Winnebago. As she seduces him, she takes off her clothes. Sonny tries to explain that he has a girlfriend, but he can't find the words. Just then, Wendy bursts through the door to surprise him. She has been hitchhiking her way across the country with the implication that she's been trading sexual favors to get rides out there.
Oh.
This is a National Lampoon movie. I feel like we keep on forgetting that.
I mean, as you do.
Wendy's not mad. She's just disappointed because she thought that he was waiting for his first time to be with her. Meanwhile, she also listed off all the guys she's previously been with. To compromise, Sonny then gives her a list of guys to sleep with to get rich and famous in a cringy exchange saying, quote, "Do you mind if he's old?" In which she replies, "Not if he's rich." This is a National Lampoon movie done in the 70s, you guys.
Oh, boy.
The same night, Cockatoo and his assistants try to kill the shark, not knowing that they were actually set up to get him killed and keep the shark alive as orchestrated by Maven. Cockatoo manages to stay alive within his bathysphere. It's basically like a little submarine.
Okay.
The assistants inform Irma and Marilyn that it's safe to film again. And then back at the Winnebago, Sonny and Darlene make love, and the scene cuts back and forth to every possible visual metaphor that you could think of.
A train going into a tunnel.
Yeah.
Classic. Yeah.
Train going into a tunnel.
Pumpkin carving.
Pan over to
Yeah.
the nightstand. Yeah.
A
It's
volcano exploding. Yeah.
Marshmallow roasting.
exactly. It's literally like 2 or 3 pages of them just going back and forth, back and forth. My guess is that they put in as many as possible so that the studio, when they're reading through this, and they're like, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. And that way they could at least put in as many as possible as the studio would allow.
I guess they weren't the only ones going back and forth.
Oh!
National Lampoon.
The next day, Maven and Droner watch from a distance the final scene being shot. If this doesn't happen, there's no movie, and they get their studio back from Irma. They watch as the shark rips through the set, causing mass chaos, crashing into platforms, causing crew members to fall into the shark-infested water. Marilyn, in a last-ditch effort to save the movie, yells at the crew to roll cameras. If they're going to die, they might as well catch it on film. After about 20 pages of chaos, it all comes to an end with Sonny aiming a gun at the shark and shouts, "All right, you son of a bitch." Turns out that gun wasn't real. Instead, it was a prop alien disintegrator. Sonny does end up standing up to the shark and does a "you shall not pass" type speech to it, causing the shark to swim away into the ocean. Filming is done, and everyone is at the premiere of Jaws 3. Wendy is covered in diamonds and accompanied by the world's richest and oldest man. Droner is knocked down a peg when it's revealed that he works the concession stand at the theater. The cast and crew watch the ridiculous movie, enjoying themselves. As for Maven, he is on a raft in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by sharks, yelling at them for not destroying the movie. He rows back to shore as fast as he can as he's being chased. Just as he is about to get to the dock, thinking that he is safe, a shark rises up from the surface and attacks Maven. Smash cut to the theater where we find the film ends with a huge explosion. The movie ends with a standing ovation. When the audience exits, they are stunned to find a shark upright on its tail, holding a bound and squirming and much alive Maven. We then tilt up to a marquee that reads, "Coming soon, Jaws 4."
Aww.
But did the shark have breasts?
I hope so.
You know what this movie reminds me of? Is Adaptation.
Oh.
This is a movie about the making of the movie that you're watching. For those who don't know, Charlie Kaufman's script, Spike Jonze directed it, starring Nicolas Cage. There's this book called The Orchid going around Hollywood at the time, and every film studio was trying to get it adapted, and nobody could really do a good adaptation. And so they hired Charlie Kaufman, and Charlie Kaufman was having a hard time adapting it into a screenplay. So what he did is he made a movie about a screenwriter named Charlie Kaufman trying to adapt this book, The Orchid, into a movie. It's very Charlie Kaufman. But I just like the idea that this kind of feels the same way of just like, how in the world do we make another Jaws sequel? We make it about making a Jaws sequel.
Yeah, because there's no right way to do this. Jaws 3, People Zero, is about the making of Jaws 2 and how ridiculous that is.
Yep. With a whole lot more sequences that would absolutely age poorly within like 5 years.
Oh,
maybe?
it already aged poorly as soon as they shot it.
Yeah.
So, as for the casting, Stephen Furst, who was Flounder in Animal House, he was actually going to play Butch, the lead of the movie. Marriott Hartley, she was Mrs. Morgan in Encino Man and Elsa in Ride the High Country. She was to play Marilyn. National Lampoon's producer Maddie Simmons confirmed that Bo Derek and Richard Dreyfuss were attached to the film for a bit.
What?
Okay.
Bo, I'm assuming, would have been Darlene. As far as Richard Dreyfuss goes, I think he might have most likely would just make a cameo.
Yeah. Probably.
That's my guess. The script was finished in the summer of 1979 and was submitted to Universal. Already a few $1 million had gone into pre-production, and to direct the film, they got Joe Dante, who's known for making Piranha.
Okay.
From an account from John Hughes, when he came into Maddie Simmons' office, he had gotten off the phone with Universal, and he was fuming because they had canceled the film. So according to Simmons, Spielberg complained about the script, which led to executives having to shut down the production. And yet, we still have a Jaws 3, or as we now know it, Jaws 3D.
3D.
Yes.
The National Lampoon script is now in the trash. And as for producers Brown and Zanuck, their time at Universal Studios was done.
Yeah.
They had quit. Brown would later regret his decision, stating it would be like fouling in your own nest. We should have fouled the nest. It would have been golden, maybe even platinum.
Like, as you said, Dan, like, there isn't a good way to do a sequel at this point. No matter what you do, you are going to fail.
So lean into it.
Yeah.
The problem right away is that they tried to attach it to the franchise. And I think that's the issue there, is that because they tried to attach it to the franchise, that's where they went wrong. Had they tried to make its own separate movie, like National Lampoon presents Jaws 3, People Zero, and just kind of make it its own thing, then you kind of accept it as like the silly slapstick movie and would be much more favored. Whereas this one, since you have the same producers from Jaws 1, Jaws 2, they're looking at this as like, we have to make a third film for Jaws, and this is going to be part of it. That's where they went wrong initially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. To write the new script, the studio roped in Richard Matheson, who wrote Steven Spielberg's first film, Duel, to put together a story. A lot of the story issues came out of a bunch of studio notes that didn't allow Matheson to create a great story. They wanted to include Brody's two sons. They wanted the same shark that was electrocuted in Jaws 2. And they had to force write in a role to include Mickey Rooney, who wasn't even available to film.
That's okay.
In the end, he was not happy with the movie, stating, quote, "I'm a good storyteller and I wrote a good outline and a good script. And if they had done it right, and if it had been directed by someone who knew how to direct, I think the movie would have been excellent. Jaws 3D was the only thing Joe Elves ever directed. The man is a very skilled production designer, but as a director, no."
Oof.
And the so-called 3D just made the film look murky. It had no effect whatsoever. It was a waste of time.
How do you even market that? I know at the time there was other 3D films, and that was, again, kind of tying into what the fad is at the time, because Jaws 2 was a slasher film, and Jaws 3D was just capitalizing on, like, you know, Friday the 13th 3D. When they would put it on TV even, they would air it technically 3D sometimes, and it's like, how? You don't have the proper glasses.
Yeah.
Or worse, they would only show you half of the film. So they would show you like the left eye and not the right eye, which just makes everything blurry. So it was incredibly dumb of them to try to like market it past that point. Like, I feel like just the 3D fad should have just died at that point.
I don't know if anyone remembers when Chuck came out with a 3D episode.
I remember that.
It was right after the Super Bowl.
David, don't you own the glasses from Chuck 3D?
No, I definitely don't own those.
Or did I own it and I threw it away? Here's the thing. I never really watched Chuck, but I remember that there were 3D glasses for it.
Yeah, and it was like those red and blue ones.
Around that time, too, is when Spy Kids 3D was coming out, and that trend with Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Shark, another 3D shark.
My favorite 3D cell had to be Arrested Development. They're like, this episode's going to feature a 3D moment. And there's that one part. They flash it on the screen like right away. And they're like, put on your 3D glasses now. And Buster throws a tomato at the screen. And it's only one shot. It's probably less than a second long. And they're like, oh, that's it. That's all the 3D you get.
Talking about all of you getting jobs. Now, the best place to look for... Who threw the tomato?
To save Jaws 3 from sinking, producer Alan Lunsberg bought the rights for the film. Prior to that, he was known for producing a lot of nature and wildlife documentaries. Most importantly, he produced a 3D film for the Maryland theme park called Sea Dream. To direct the film, he got experienced filmmaker Murray Lerner, who directed Sea Dream. Lerner read the script for Jaws 3D, did not like it, and declined the offer, stating, I can't really get involved with this. Gordon Trueblood was given a story credit because the script was too similar to an unproduced script he wrote while a great white shark gets trapped in a lake. Carl Goteb, who wrote Jaws 2, got screenwriting credit for revising the script, although Matheson has reported that it was done anonymously by script doctors. Joe Elves, whose only directing credit is for Jaws 3D, was initially hired as a production designer for the first 2 weeks before he was unexpectedly promoted. Elves was also involved with the first 2 Jaws films as the production designer and the second unit director. So really, of all the people, he's like, you're the only one that stuck around, so I guess you get it. So you get credit for showing up. He was also nearly the co-director for Jaws 2 when Hancock had left the project. The movie was greenlit, and that was filmed in Florida. At that time, 3D films like Amityville 3D and Friday the 13th Part 3 were done in 3D, and Universal wanted to capitalize in on that. I think we mentioned that before. This was done with the help of AriVision 3D using a twin lens adapter, and with that they were able to accomplish the 3D look. And that's why we have Jaws 3D and not Jaws 3 People 0.
Oh.
They did get their schlocky Jaws third film, though, that's for sure.
Yes, they did.
It's not the worst in the franchise, because Jaws 4 is something else.
It's a fever dream.
Again, my favorite quote about Jaws 4, which comes from Michael Caine.
He was in that.
Wait, he's in Jaws 4?
He's in Jaws 4.
Is he like acting the shit out of it? Like he always does?
Oh, no, he's phoning it in.
Oh, my goodness.
So the quote that I love from him is he said, I've never seen Jaws 4, but I've seen the house that it bought, and it's amazing.
It's beautiful. I love that quote. And this kind of ties into just like the mindset of these actors going into these films. Because we didn't even talk about some of the actors that were in Jaws 3. Dennis Quaid, he's one of Brody's sons, like the eldest son. It wasn't his first acting role, but it was definitely one of his earlier ones. And he was completely high off of cocaine the entire time. Like, he had admitted it. Leah Thompson was also in this movie. I think this was her acting debut, if I'm not mistaken. Out of all the performances, I think hers is like the most believable.
I bet I can overcome your childhood fears.
I mean, if it's her first movie, I feel like she's going to go to the nines for like everything and be like, I'm going to be the best possible, because it's still a Universal movie.
Yeah. And it's a movie that will bring in people and will bring in potential casting agents.
And money. Yeah.
And money.
You are right that this is the first big movie that she has been in was Jaws 3D. I think her first big role was Red Dawn before getting the much known for in her career, the Back to the Future role.
Bess Armstrong. She played Dennis Quaid's love interest, Catherine. Out of all of the actors in that movie, I think she took it the most serious. Dan, you wearing that Jurassic Park shirt is perfect for Jaws 3D because it essentially is Jurassic Park with a shark. Jurassic Shark, if you will, because SeaWorld teamed up with Universal. They were trying to get themselves free promotion while also providing their park for them to film in. So they would have actual dolphin acts and stuff like that. Bess Armstrong was supposed to be one of the dolphin trainers or one of the whale trainers. And so she trained for weeks to actually be able to do some of the tricks. Like the first time we see her character, she rides in on a orca whale, like a complete natural. Like she took it so seriously. Meanwhile, Dennis Quaid's like, I'm high off my ass, man.
That's exactly.
Like, what is this movie? So everything after that fact, it's like, if you're in Jaws, just don't even try. Just show up.
You mentioning the Jurassic Park, which is Jaws with dinosaurs. I still love the pitch for Alien was Jaws in space.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Yeah. It just goes back full circle to the original Jaws film, completely changed the industry.
Yeah. I mean, you could essentially do that with like most any blockbusters.
So every movie was just Jaws in a different form.
Yeah, Forrest Gump is just Jaws through time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harry Potter's is Jaws with magic. Like
Infinity War is Thanos' Jaws.
Purple Space Jaws. Yeah.
Wasn't Kevin Smith working on a movie at one point that he was calling Jaws with a moose?
Jaws with a moose?
I think literally the working title was Moose Jaws.
Oh, I thought it was going to be antlers or something.
No, that was the final title. It was literally called Moose Jaws.
Well, looks like
Oh,
that's
that
a
never got
movie
made.
y'all got to talk about.
Well, that's going to be
There goes your
another-
next episode.
That's a new episode.
It's the third part in his trilogy that started with Tusk.
Ah, I see.
Weirdly enough, a Jaws movie featuring a moose is kind of already been done. I don't know if you remember Tundra Comics.
Oh, yeah.
Chad Carpenter, the cartoonist behind Tundra Comics, he's from Alaska. He made a movie called Moose, which is exactly that. It's a horror film featuring a moose, but it's a comedy.
As the cold of winter approaches, an unholy bellowing deep in the forest can be heard.
I've never seen it, but I heard mediocre things.
Moose are really terrifying, so who's laughing now?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Real advice, if you ever come into contact with a moose and a moose is attacking you, play dead and do not get up. If you are still moving, you are still a potential predator and they will stomp you out. Do not mess with the moose. Do not try to get up and run. It will kill you.
wait for it to leave and then pick up the moose droppings because they use that for for souvenirs.
Yeah.
They dip it in gold.
It's a dangerous profession. More dangerous than crab fishing or ice road trucking.
It's such a dangerous profession for like such a gag gift. Like a sacrifice for comedy, if you will.
Do we got anything else we want to say about this movie before we bring it to a close? We talked about whether or not we'd actually want to see this. And the answer is the idea, yes. The script, no. At least that's my answer.
If they lose all the breasts, I would have said yes.
Oh, no, more
that's how it would
breasts.
have been.
More shark breasts. I will be first in line.
Sorry, there is one thing I wanted to bring up and I just remembered
Yeah.
it. The only good part of Jaws 3D, it's like simultaneously the worst part and the best part. Have you guys seen that shot that's like the scary climactic shot where the shark is like breaking through the glass?
Yes, I remember that.
First of all, that is the worst part of the film because, oh my God, that effect is so incredibly bad. What happens directly after that is simultaneously one of the coolest effects in the film. They had a set of the control room elevated above a pool with like water being poured in, like kind of being bounced off of like a ramp or something. So that was the initial hit of the shark coming in. And then it would slowly lower itself into the pool, like simulating that the water was coming up.
That's cool.
It was really ahead of its time in terms of that type of practical effect. But like that setup is just probably the worst thing. Again, Jaws 3, even with that, is still better than Jaws 4. And yes, I would absolutely never watch this film again.
Well, I guess that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. So thank you, Michael and Alexa, for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course. I love talking about shark breasts with you.
You're the only friends I would talk to about it. Yeah.
I really regret making that joke earlier. I feel like I threw it out as a joke, and now I can't tell if you're trying to punish me by constantly referencing it again.
I think we keep going back to it because it just helps water down the blatant sexism that we experience in that script.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Easy shorthand for all the problems happening.
Exactly.
Correct. Yes. So thank you for that joke. That's why we keep bringing it up, because we don't want to bring up the actual breasts that happened to that movie.
If you want to find more episodes of this podcast, you can go check out our website, pipedreampodcasts.com, where you can also find Come On Fhqwhpods, which I do with Michael and Alexa, talking about every Homestar Runner cartoon. And while you're there, you can also check out Escape from Vault Disney and the Mystery Shack Look Back. You can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at HDTNGM. We're on Instagram at How Did This Not Get Made? And you can send us your emails, notgetmade@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. Send us another suggestion as great as this one. While you're there, you can check out our Patreon page. We are so thankful for everybody who donates. With that donation, you can access exclusive monthly episodes with the four of us talking about nonsense and whatever else is on our mind. Again, just find that link on our website or on patreon.com. Just look up the Pipe Dream Podcasts Patreon. We are so thankful for all of our donors who help keep our podcasts going. That's going to go ahead and wrap us up for today. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Smile, you son of a bitch.
Oh, say ah.
Was that from the sequel?
That's from the sequel. It is so bad. It's so bad.
Oh my
Brush
goodness.
twice a day. Like,
You forgot to floss. Like, it's just.
I'll see myself out for real this time.